Welcome to One Bills Lite, the drive-through window version of One Bills Live, where we give you statistical trends in a game show fashion, some Bills knowledge that may have slipped through the cracks, and we answer one burning question. That, plus our interview guest, senior producer from NFL Films, Greg Cosell. Let's get to it.
And it's Steve Tasker who has been all over the field.
Kind of unique. He was kind of a dual-role player for you. Steve!
A balloon.
Steve! A blimp? We're not even in the stratosphere of normalcy here. Chris Brown, Steve Tasker here with you for another episode of One Bills Lite, where we provide some of the more interesting aspects of the Buffalo Bills in as entertaining a way as possible, all in about 30 to 40 minutes. And we begin, as always, Steve, with your favorite part of the show, our numbers game, where we test the limits of Steve's football acumen.
Yes.
And in our last episode, we discussed the likelihood of Stefon Diggs setting the all-time single-season receptions record in Bills history. He's currently tied, as you know, Steve, with Eric Moulds at exactly 100 receptions, which is the record that Eric originally set in 2002. And he's right there, as expected, Steve, after a 10-catch performance in last week's win against the Steelers.
Yeah, he's going to get it. He's healthy. They're headed into Denver, and I'll bet he breaks this record in the first series of the game, right? I mean, the question is, what's the number going to be after 2020?
Yeah, and I know we debated that in our last One Bills Light podcast episode, and we were saying somewhere between 105, 115, because we're wondering if he even plays in Week 16.
Right.
So...
Of course,
but right
then he
now,
goes out and jumps out and gets 10 catches on the day.
He's got 4 games with 10 receptions.
Right. So we have to rethink.
May have to up that a little.
Right. It might be 115 to 120.
Yeah.
With 3 games left, that'd give him 7 games. That'd be 7 catches, or right at 6 catches a game.
Yeah.
6.5 games. It's gonna be a big number.
And he's in a race too with Keenan Allen of the Chargers for the league receptions title. Allen one catch behind him at 99, entering the Thursday night game for the Chargers with the Raiders.
The problem with Keenan Allen and being in a race with Keenan Allen and who's playing for the Chargers is the Chargers are going to have their foot on the gas all the way to the end of the season.
Yeah.
They're trying to win games. The Bills, maybe not so much, depending on what the people around them do. Now, certainly the Bills could jump into the 2 seed if they tie with Pittsburgh. The Bills could catch them this weekend. Certainly if the Bills win, they clinch the division. Well, if you clinch the division, the only thing possible to enhance your season would be getting the number 2 seed, maybe the number 1 seed if the wheels fall off Kansas City. But that you have to weigh: are you really interested in getting the 2 seed rather than having the 3 seed, more than resting Josh Allen, Devin Singletary, Knox, or whoever. Name the starters you want. You can pick the guys you want to rest. Is that more important going into the playoffs, having those guys a little fresher, than getting the 2 seed rather than the 3 seed?
Yeah.
Neither one gets a bye. That's the big question. And that all affects Steph Diggs in this race with Keenan Allen.
Right.
I mean, who are you going to rest first? You can't afford anything to happen to Steph Diggs.
Yeah. And I think they might be in the fortunate position where if they get John Brown back in the next week or two, they're going to need to get him up to speed so he could conceivably
take a lion's share of the snaps.
Just to get him up to speed and ready for the playoffs. He's going to be looking to get action so he's not super rusty going into the postseason, so maybe he replaces Diggs in that number 1 role for the last week or two of the season. That's possible.
Yeah, that's possible too.
If you don't need the games.
Right. I don't know if there's ever going to be a time when you don't need the games. Here's the thing. They just had a bye week 2 weeks ago and 2 games ago. They're getting healthier. And I think with the sports science and things, I think they can keep these guys fresh.
Yeah.
The risk isn't wearing them out. The risk is a high ankle.
Freak injury.
A freak injury. Not even a freak injury, a whatever injury you want to call it.
Run-of-the-mill injury.
To a guy that's near and dear to you, That's the question.
Yeah.
And the simple fact of the matter is this, though. If you're Josh Allen and you're playing the way you're playing now, you're probably as safe as you're ever going to be. because because of the rules, because of the way you're playing, the ball's coming out of your hands. You're not getting sacked that much. They're not running any called runs, and plus you have control over called runs. You you say, listen, we're not going to run him at all. He's going to throw from the pocket, so you can kind of keep him safe, and he can keep himself safe. But it's the rest of the guys who you're going to need down the stretch and in the playoffs that are a risk, physically. So that's we go through this every year. You see teams go through it every year, but it's something that really hasn't affected the Bills all that much of late.
Right, but it's a lot to consider for sure. In this week's episode, though, we are going to talk about another part of the receiving game, namely sure-handedness. Now, per NFL Radar 360 stats and information, there is one Bills player on the league's current top 10 list for both fewest drops and lowest drop percentage. Care to take a guess as to who that might be?
How do they qualify?
Well, they say that drop percentage is the number of targets thrown to them that are deemed catchable. So it is subjective in terms of what drop percentage is.
I would say Beasley.
And you would be correct, Steve. You are off to a good start.
All right.
So Cole Beasley is the only Bills receiving target who is in the top 10 in the NFL right now, entering Week 15, with the lowest drop percentage. So, and I will tell you, as I ask you to see how many of the remaining 9 in the top 10 league-wide you can name, this includes receivers and tight ends. There are no backs, none of them.
Here we go.
Okay, so, and I will also tell you that the qualifier to be in this lowest drop percentage category requires them to be targeted at least 60 times so far this season. So it's not some schlub that's caught 3 out of 3 targets. Right. You know what I mean?
Number 1 for me, Hopkins, DeAndre Hopkins.
Hopkins is number 1 in the league. He has 1 drop on 127 targets. That is insane.
I wish he had 2.
Yeah, me too.
Let's go. Let's do this. Let's go. Kittle.
Kittle is not on this list.
All right.
And incidentally, Cole Beasley is number 7 on this list. His drop percentage is 2.7%. He has 2 drops on 92 targets this season.
Devontae Johnson, or the guy in Green Bay.
Oh, Devontae Adams?
Devontae Adams.
He is not on this list,
All right.
which shocked me. I think he's just outside the top 10. And I'm going to say this. Pro Football Focus also does drops, and they have him with 0 or 1 drop or 0 drops on 144 targets, and the list is not nearly the same in the NFL Sports Radar 360 statistical site, which I am using as a reference point here. So that's not a bad guess at all. And again, as I told you, this drop percentage thing is subjective. You got a guy watching tape, and he's like, oh, that's a catchable ball. He dropped it. All right, I'm going to mark him down.
So what you're telling me is anybody I guess is probably true.
Well, yeah, if you guess the right
speaking.
people.
Yeah, right.
If you guess the right people.
All right, here we go. I will say Keenan Allen.
Yes, he is number 8 on the list. He has 3 drops on 144 targets, which is pretty impressive.
I will say Fuller. Will Fuller.
Fuller is not on this list. No. I will tell you, these are almost all receivers. There is 1 tight end on this list.
60 targets?
Yeah, think about a high-volume tight end.
Kelsey in Kansas City, and then, hold on, Darren Waller.
It is not Darren Waller. Your first guess was correct. I will give you Travis Kelsey.
Oh, okay.
2 drops on 120 targets.
All right.
This guy's a freak of nature.
Yeah, he's pretty good.
We'll talk about him a little bit later in the pod here.
Yards at a tight. Okay. How many have I got?
You've got 4 out of 10, counting Beasley.
This is going to be like this is.
I will ask you to try to get
like
at
a
least
standardized test.
Let's try to get at least 2 more on this list.
All right.
Think of high volume target guys for their respective teams, and I will tell you that of the guys remaining, most of them are in the NFC.
Really?
Yeah. We only have 2 AFC
Adams.
receivers left.
How about? Gosh, who's going to be? I don't know if I know enough wide receivers. Robert Wood.
Robert Woods is not on this list. There are no Rams on this top
Really?
list. Yeah, I was surprised about that.
What about
as well.
DK Metcalf?
Metcalf, no, he was just outside the top 10. Just outside.
I don't know any other receivers on Seattle.
Yeah, I would say, well, there are two from the NFC East, if you can believe it or not.
I don't even know a single receiver in the NFC.
Yes, you do. You do. You know a big-time receiver on a highly visible team.
Oh, Amari Cooper.
Amari Cooper is number 5 on this list. 2 drops and 112 targets.
And then
let's try to get one more here.
All right,
and then we'll call it a day.
Let's say
see the problem.
Robbie Anderson.
Robbie Anderson's not on this list. No. So the other NFC East.
Wait, Mike Evans.
Not Mike Evans.
God.
Another NFC East receiver is Terry McLaurin.
Oh yeah.
For Washington. 2 drops and 114 targets. Chicago's Allen Robinson, 2 drops on 128 targets. And he's playing with 2 different quarterbacks this year.
In Chicago?
Yeah.
Wow.
Pretty impressive. Justin Jefferson, the rookie from Minnesota, 2 drops on 92 targets.
That is the guy. And this is the big story on Jefferson is that the Vikings traded away Stefon Diggs, and we couldn't be happier in Buffalo about it. And they're happy with their guy as well. And
on a rookie contract.
On a rookie contract, yeah.
Juju Smith-Schuster, number 10, 3 drops on 101 targets. Number 2 on this list is going to surprise you, I think. Buffalo's favorite non-Bill, Tyler Boyd.
Oh, yeah.
1 drop on 106 targets.
Is he still in Cincinnati?
He is. Slot guy.
There you go.
A lot of short passes, so high percentage targets.
I would be sure. Well, in years past, it would be Edelman and those guys, you know.
Yeah. So that is the list right now. So good job. You did all right there. Part 2 of our numbers game involves Bills receiving touchdown streaks. As we know, Bills rookie wide receiver Gabriel Davis now has a touchdown catch in each of his last 3 games. First, do you know what the Bills' record is for consecutive games with a touchdown catch? What do you think the number is?
7 or 8.
It's only 5.
Really?
It's only 5. I was shocked.
I'm shocked.
Only 5.
5. That's
there
good.
There are 4 Bills
Okay.
who share this record of 5 consecutive games with a touchdown catch. Can you name those 4? Five consecutive
Andre
games.
Reed.
It is not Andre. He's not on that list.
You're
I was
kidding me.
stunned.
He had like a 72-game streak of
Catches,
yeah.
but not
All right,
touchdowns.
5 in a row. Molds.
Molds is on the list. Did it in 1999.
Peerless.
Peerless is not on the list.
Elbert DeBinion.
Elbert DeBinion, 1964 as a rookie. So here's Gabriel Davis as a rookie. He's done it in 3 straight games.
Okay, so I got Molds.
You got Molds and DeBinion. You have 2 left.
Jerry Butler.
Not Jerry Butler. No.
Marlon Briscoe.
Not Marlon Briscoe. I will give you a hint. They are both. The 2 remaining guys are both in the 21st century. Stevie Johnson in 2010. Nice job. 1 left. And this guy also did it in his rookie season like DeBinion. 5.
Oh, Lee Evans.
Lee Evans, 2004. Well done, Steve. You ran the table on that one. That was good.
That was a good rebound from not knowing anybody in the
Devontae
NFL.
Adams, who we mentioned earlier, set a Packers franchise record last week with his 8th straight game with a receiving touchdown. It's the 3rd longest streak in the Super Bowl era, Steve. There's only 2 other guys with a longer streak in NFL history. You want to take a wild swing.
All right.
Longest consecutive game streak in NFL history with a touchdown catch.
Randy Moss.
Not Randy Moss.
Jerry Rice.
Jerry Rice has the record, 12 straight games, 1987.
That's so big.
That is stupid.
That
is just stupid. And there's one other player
so off the
who
hook.
did it in 9 straight games. That's the number 2 guy. And
Larry Fitzgerald.
It is not Larry Fitzgerald.
It's got to be a guy that played for a while.
It's a guy that played for a while, and he is still active right now. He did this, though, back in 2012, and he has the 2nd longest.
Somebody like
streak.
Alshon Jeffrey or somebody like
Not
that?
Alshon Jeffrey. It's A.J. Green. 9 games.
Okay.
9 games for A.J. Green in 2012.
That makes
So,
some sense. That would have been Julio or somebody, too.
yeah, so, I mean, some impressive performances there, but really exciting to know that
12
Gabriel Davis is only 2 games off the
Bills,
team record to become the 5th player in Bills history to match the 5 games with a touchdown catch consecutive game streak. So that would be pretty exciting if he could do that.
That'd be kind of nice.
So we'll have to see
That'd
if it
be a nice
continues.
little cherry on the cake of this season.
All right, I put you through enough, Steve, with the numbers game. Time now for our interview with senior producer from NFL Films, Greg Cosell. And the head of the Taron Johnson fan club. It's one Greg Cosell, everybody. Greg, how you doing?
Chris, Steve, I'm doing great. How are you guys doing?
We're doing well. We're poking fun at you saying head of the Taron Johnson fan club. But
hey, I go by what the tape shows. I think this kid's playing really good football.
The defense as a whole, Greg, over the last, certainly since the bye, but even before then, they were showing signs of improvement. But since the bye, Greg, this run defense has cut the production of their opponents in half. It was 135 rushing yards a game through the first 10 weeks. And in the last 3 weeks, it's been shaved down to about 67, 68 yards a game. And I know one of those opponents was Pittsburgh, who's had trouble running the ball against anybody.
Yeah, that's true. I think the 3 of us could stop the Steelers' run game.
That's right. But still in all, I mean, some sizable improvements from this Bills defense, which has really kind of made them into a 3-phase football team.
No, it's a great point, because I think one of the concerns early in the year, which was overshadowed by how well Josh Allen has played all season and his dramatic improvement, has been that the defense for the first half of the season was not what we thought it would be. And now it's clearly played better, and it makes them a far more complete team. And I think now, not that you want anyone to get hurt. Of course, you never want that. But with Milano being out for a few weeks and A.J. Klein getting an opportunity to play for a number of weeks, almost every snap, he's played phenomenal football. So now they've got sort of a 3-headed monster in their sub-nickel defense. Obviously, Edmonds never leaves the field, but Klein and Milano, this week Milano played more snaps. I think it was almost split pretty evenly with Klein, but that position now is a really strong position with 2 really good players. Hey, you mentioned me with Taron Johnson, but he's played really good football over the last month. And in this game that we're seeing the interception return for a touchdown, he's really competitive against the run in the run game as well, which you have to be in this league now as a slot corner. So, this defense has really come on. And of course, I've always, based on tape study, been a big fan of both safeties, Hyde and Poyer. I think they're really good players.
And how do you think this defense and the way it's playing now meshes with what the Broncos did? We thought and have heard that Drew Lock really took a little bit of a step forward this past week with his completion percentage, his decision-making, and how it affected their offense. How do you think these two mesh?
Well, I watched that tape, Steve, and I think that they played a defense in Carolina that's not tactically difficult to play against. It was a good game for Drew Lock to kind of get back on track, because he is a talented kid. Has some concerns clearly, but he's a very talented kid. And I think that Carolina defense, the way they play, it was a good game for him to sort of get comfortable. I don't think that Sean and Leslie will let him get quite as comfortable. And now, having said that, the kid has a really good arm. He can make every throw. He's an aggressive thrower. He needs to better understand game situations and when he can turn certain throws loose and when he can't. But there's no question any given week he can make big-time throws.
I got to ask you as well, it's been talked about a lot here in Buffalo. It's hard to get a straight answer from Sean McDermott or Brian Daboll, the offensive coordinator. What did you notice that was different in the second half of the Buffalo-Pittsburgh game for the Bills offense? What adjustments did you notice? Because they came out and had 2 very, very impressive touchdown drives to put the game away early in the third quarter.
Yeah, I think I'm not being sarcastic here. I think they threw it to Diggs versus matchups they like. Diggs caught 6 passes for 83 yards on the Bills' first 2 possessions of the third quarter. He lined up on the right side of the formation on all but the 19-yard touchdown. And a lot of them were just quick game type throws, Steve. So again, they saw something that allowed them to believe, hey, those quick game throws would work, but it didn't strike me. And again, these guys know more than I do. Clearly, they're coaches about their offense. But it wasn't a case where I was looking at, detailed route concepts that attacked a specific coverage concept. They just they got the ball to Stefon Diggs on basic routes. And, when you catch 6 passes on 2 possessions, 6 for 83 would be a nice game every week for a wide receiver. And he did that on the first 2 possessions of the third quarter.
And then, Greg, taking it a step further, I saw some next-gen stats this week, and it explains how even though Diggs is one of the leading receivers in the league right now, he's gone about it a much different way. He's relied primarily on the hitch route to get most of his yards, where, a lot of the other players that are at the top of the league in receiving yards and receptions have relied on much bigger plays to accumulate their yardage and receptions. And I was struck by Michael Ojemudia, the rookie corner who's now in the starting lineup for the Broncos. He said, I could watch Stefon Diggs run the hitch route 350 times on tape, and I'm still not going to be able to defend it any better because he runs it that well. We all know that he's an elite route runner, but what is it about the way he runs that hitch route that makes him so hard to figure out?
Well, I think, and Steve would understand this very well, I think the way you run a hitch route is dependent on the way the corner is playing. Because I think you run a hitch route differently versus a press. You run it differently versus an off-coverage corner. So, I think it's dependent on how the corner is playing. I mean, clearly, if you're going to run a hitch route against an off-coverage corner who doesn't want to give up his cushion, you have to show him in some way on your vertical stem that you're going to run vertically, because you have to get him to turn just a little bit. Because if he does not turn at all and he just sits facing you, then then the route's not there. And obviously, if it's press coverage, then you also have to make him feel in your release off the line of scrimmage that you're going to run by him, so he turns and runs. So obviously, Diggs is very nuanced, very detailed, very disciplined in how he runs routes against specific corners, specific coverage type corners. So, and Ojemudia, he's a rookie, and he'll be the most experienced corner, I think. Maybe not the most experienced, but they're really down corners this week in Denver. So I'm not even sure who'll play opposite him. Maybe Devontae Bosby. Who's your sense of who's going to play opposite him with all their injuries?
Yeah, it's pretty much Bosby and Ojemudia as your starting 2 corners, and then Will Parks is going to have to probably be the nickel because that's where he played some last week, as I understand it. And then they just signed Nate Hairston, and he's going to probably have to dress.
He's a Temple kid. He's a Temple kid from this area. He's been in the league. He could get some snaps as well, but they're really hurting at the corner position.
So with that in mind, Greg, would you anticipate that it just makes too much sense for Brian Daboll to go 10 personnel, maybe even more than he has, just to stretch that cornerback contingent all the thinner?
Yeah, I would do that. I mean, I think look, we know that they're a passing football team. Obviously, we talk every week about how much they'd like to run, but they don't really run, although it was mighty impressive that they got the ball with 7 minutes and 11 seconds remaining in the game this week and ran out the clock. I mean, if you can do that, that is pretty darn good.
Yeah.
And Moss had 4 consecutive runs, pretty nice runs. But I think when all's said and done, they're a passing football team right now. And I think this week sets up for that to be the case. So the main thing is protection, obviously. But, you want them to have to go as deep as possible into their secondary. Now, you could easily see Kareem Jackson, who has corner experience, if they go 4 wide and 10 personnel, it would not surprise me, given their injuries, to see Kareem Jackson play some corner.
Yeah. One of the other things about this matchup that I wanted to get your thoughts on is Denver has an excellent red zone defense, and Buffalo's pretty good in the red zone as well. Josh has yet to throw a career interception down in the red zone. But this matchup may be crucial because if Buffalo's going to score points and put some distance between themselves and put the pressure on them offensively, they're going to have to make hay in the red zone and come away with a lot of touchdowns instead of field goals. So how do you think – what do the Denver Broncos do so well in the red zone, and how could Buffalo attack that?
Well, it's funny. We can talk about their lacking personnel, but Vic Fangio, to me, and I've talked to people in the league, he's a savant when it comes to defense. He is really, really good at showing you one thing and then doing something else. He's really good with disguise and movement. Safeties are really important to him. And in the red zone where it's tighter, that even matters more when you sort of show something and it's not exactly what it is. One area I think Josh has improved dramatically this year, though, and I'm speaking about the red zone, is the ability to make quick decisions and get the ball out with timing and anticipation. I think back to that Beasley touchdown versus San Francisco, where Richard Sherman was just, a hair late getting there, but in the red zone, a hair late is a mile late. You guys know that. So I think that Josh is so much better with his elimination of where he does not want to go, and then is isolating where you should go, because everything is a little faster in the red zone. It has to be faster because there's not enough room, and I think that's an area where he's really improved.
What about the Josh's the threat of him being a runner down there? But obviously, when you get in the red zone, the run game, if you can run the ball in the red zone, everything changes for the offense and obviously also for the defense. So Josh's ability to do that has got to weigh on Vic Fangio's mind as well.
No question. And I think that happens particularly in the tight red zone from the 10 yards in, where you can put Josh in the gun, you can spread him out, you can force him to defend the width of the field, and then you lighten the box. And that's where the run game with Josh becomes a factor, maybe a quarterback draw. We'll see. But, that's always a factor with Josh Allen in the red zone. We haven't seen as much of it lately because, they've been scoring. They've been doing well. But that's certainly part of what they do. And here you're seeing a zone read type play, which they certainly can do as well. But no, Josh Allen's legs in the red zone are a definite factor.
Looking at Denver's offense, Greg, obviously they tried to add speed to their unit in the draft with KJ Hamler, who had a big game last week with 2 touchdowns. And then Jerry Jeudy is a really accomplished route runner for a young player. They didn't have Noah Fant last week because of food poisoning, it seems like, more than anything else. He's back this week, and I know the Bills have been susceptible to giving up catches and yards to opposing tight ends this year. I think they have the second highest total in the league allowed. Maybe just paint the picture for us on Fant a little bit and the weapon that he can be in the Broncos passing game.
Well, Fant is almost one of those glorified wide receivers who's just big enough to be a tight end. He came out of Iowa. He actually played with T.J. Hawkinson. Fant is a speed guy. You want to be careful with him with 2 things. He can win vertically, and he can run after catch. And you want to make sure, look, obviously you do not want to give up big vertical plays, but more importantly, you do not want him to get the ball and then to run after catch. And now they do some things to try to get him the ball in space where that becomes a factor. So you've got to be careful with him. Now, they've got a very good receiving core. Tim Patrick has really emerged as kind of a boundary X. Big kid, runs well. Jeudy is a fascinating guy. Obviously, their pass game this year has been very inconsistent. Lock missed time. He's still finding his way. But I watched tape of their offense, and it seems like Jerry Jeudy's open all the time. He just is a really good route runner. And then KJ Hamler, he's a Penn State kid who he's got great quickness, great lateral quickness, has some vertical ability, as we saw last week. So they do have a very good and very explosive receiving core. They just have not developed any kind of consistent passing game. And some of that's a function of Locke missing time, and then some of it's a function of Locke just not being consistent himself yet. So, but you just don't want this to be the week that it all clicks.
We've heard that, Drew Lock has, he's one of those guys that loves to throw the football down the field.
Oh, yeah.
And is it that they call plays like that, or are they trying to get to him to get him to take easier completions? Are they designing – because I think he was 12 for 12 to start against Carolina, which is, a great start for a quarterback, obviously. Was that game planned, or was it just him, somebody getting to his ear and just taking those easy completions for a change?
Well, there were a number of those easy ones in that game, and I think one of the main issues with Locke is doing that, is taking those plays, is being a sustaining quarterback and not just a big play quarterback, because this league is all about situational football. We always tend to talk about that more in terms of the defense with situational football because of the different personnel packages. But that's very true for offense as well, and for quarterbacks. That's why the term system quarterback is not a negative term, or game manager is not a negative term, because every quarterback has to manage game situations and understand when you make throws and when you don't make throws. And Drew is still learning that. So, some of it's by design, obviously, but he'll turn it loose. And, you want to be in a situation where when he turns it loose, that he's not going to hit big plays because he's more than capable. He's a big-time thrower of the football.
Taking a look at some of the other matchups this week, there's one that, Bills fans will have their eye on in the AFC East between the Dolphins and the Patriots. We know Bill Belichick's history against rookie quarterbacks.
Yeah.
So him against Tua, are you expecting that trend to hold and that Belichick will get the better of him?
Well, I'll tell you what I think I'll expect from Bill's defense. Whether it works, I guess we'll find out. I think what you'll see from Bill's defense, because Tua is such a timing rhythm player. And in fact, Belichick spoke about that in his press conference this week. I think what you'll see is a lot of disguise and late movement in coverage, so that when Tua hits that back foot, what he saw at the snap is not going to be the same thing that he sees when he hits that back foot, and therefore force him to hold the football. Because where Tua is not yet at that point in his career, and who knows, he may never be, we don't know what he's going to be, but what you want with Tua is you want him to hit that back foot and not be able to throw where he thinks he wants to throw, and then see what happens after that. But Tua is so timing rhythm based with a great feel for the passing game, but everything comes out. And you want to make sure that it doesn't come out, or if it does come out, that you've shown him something that he thinks, but it's not really that.
Right. What is the matchup around the league that you guys are most looking forward to, at NFL matchup?
Probably KC New Orleans.
Mm-hmm.
Drew Brees will be back this week. There are two things that immediately stand out when you watch the Chiefs defense with Steve Spagnuolo, and that's that they play a lot of man coverage and they heat you up with blitz. And I would do that with Drew Brees because Drew's been out for 5 weeks or so. Great Hall of Fame player, but you know when you're out, Steve, when you're out 4 or 5 weeks, it's a little faster right away when you get back in. And plus Drew's going to want to get it out fast because of the nature of his injuries. He's not going to want to take shots. So I would play press and I would heat him up. And obviously, Spags didn't give me a call to get my opinion, but that's the way I would see it.
Right.
All right, Greg, thanks for the insight. As always, we appreciate it. We'll keep an eye out for you on the ESPN NFL Matchup show this weekend.
All right, guys, appreciate it. Thanks.
Thank
All
you,
right,
Greg.
that's Greg Cosell, senior producer of NFL Films and the self-appointed president of the Taron Johnson fan club. We have to take
this week anyway.
Right? That's right. All right, Steve, I know we played the numbers game in the first half of the program. On the back half here, there are some other numbers that are coming about as we wind down the regular season. Numbers that make you say, wow, just some amazing statistics. And I wanted to run some past you just to see what you think. This is the state of the Texans as we know it. Deshaun Watson is 12-0 as a starter when he is sacked 1 or fewer times. He is 16-22 when he is sacked 2 or more times in a game.
Yeah.
If that doesn't make you feel bad for Deshaun Watson, I don't know what does. I mean, that is just – I know they made the trade for Laramie Tunsil to try to improve things up front, knowing how valuable Deshaun Watson is to their success, but they got to just draft 4 linemen next year or something, or trade for another one. You protect him, you win.
I think the NFL, I get it, but when Bill O'Brien was the head coach and then became general manager, it became really evident of what has to happen in an NFL football team. You can't just say, we got to win now.
Yeah.
If you do, you're going to pay the piper. And the Texans are a perfect example of that.
Yeah. I mean, Brandon Beane said we want to win now, but we also have to build to be perennially good so we can contend.
And that's why
that's a delicate balance,
yeah.
But the good general managers can do it.
And I'll tell you this, they built this thing over 3 years to get to this point. They had 2 full seasons of play in football where well, 3 full with Sean McDermott. The first year they come in, they had some players here, but it wasn't the right culture to be sustainable or continue on. It wasn't what they wanted to do to be the kind of program they wanted going forward. They get to the playoffs that year, one and done in Jacksonville. The next year they get Josh. They take a step backwards, but they start building what they want to get. They start putting the pieces together. They were cap-strapped because of what happened.
Right, bite the bullet that year.
Exactly. They had to bite the bullet. They couldn't get the players they wanted. Then the next year, of course, last year, they kind of began to build it the way they wanted to build it. And of course, they went to the playoffs, and now they're sustaining it going forward and actually getting better.
Meanwhile, Houston's a mess.
Yeah, Houston's
off
the map.
They're gonna have to get a new GM,
new
head
coach, and they got like 19 people. They got people writing articles about who's making the decision in Houston about how dysfunctional it seems to be.
It is,
and you got to take your time, build it the right way, and trust that it's going to work. And man, oh man!
And now they're behind schedule because you got Deshaun Watson going to his 5th season next year, and I mean, the clock is ticking now. So now you got to catch up.
He signed his deal, right? He's on his second contract. So they've got their quarterback, but man, oh man, don't waste him.
Yeah, figure out the rest of it and fast. All right, here's another stat that makes you go, wow. Well, maybe not. The Jets have allowed 30-plus points, Steve, in all 8 of their non-divisional games this season. 8 straight such games is the longest streak since the NFL first split into 4 divisions in 1967. Are you surprised? I mean, 40-3 last week.
I'm a little surprised. I am a little surprised.
I mean, they're not even competitive.
I am a little surprised by that. This is another one. 2 years ago, the year Sam Darnold and Josh Allen got drafted, if you remember, the Bills and the Jets were almost in an identical position. Identical.
Yeah.
Except the Jets picked before the Bills in that draft.
Yeah.
They had a ton of cap room.
Yeah, I know what you're saying.
Ton of cap room. They had their quarterback of the future, all of that stuff. They had a chance to get a new head coach. They had a head coach in place in Todd Bowles, but they were in the exact same spot. And now 3 years later, 3 years later, what are they doing?
They're doing what they always do. Mess it up. We got to move along here. Dalvin Cook, Steve, has just as many rushing touchdowns and big rushing plays as Derrick Henry does, despite playing 1 fewer game than him this season. Knowing how much Derrick Henry gets the dang ball. And granted, the Minnesota offense now runs through Dalvin Cook, and I know he's had a big year, but I was surprised to see that.
Yeah.
Just as effective. And he has the identical number of carries per game, 22.8. But he's right there with him. 14 rushing touchdowns, 37 runs of 10-plus yards. I don't know. He's just as good, and he doesn't get nearly the pub.
No, he doesn't, because I think Minnesota's not leading their division.
Yeah, they're not winning right now.
They're not the number 1 seed. They're not winning right now. That's a big factor in that as well. Tennessee also is coming off the Cinderella finish they had to last season when they got to the conference championship game behind Tannehill and Derrick Henry. So there's kind of that carryover awareness.
Yeah.
Other than that, there is no difference. There's certainly different kinds of backs, Dalvin Cook than Derrick Henry, but Derrick Henry's good, but there's another guy just like him.
Yeah.
That's having exactly the same kind of production. That's amazing.
Last stat that will make you go, wow. Travis Kelce leads the NFL in receiving yards with 1,250 this season. No tight end has ever led the NFL in receiving yards over the course of a full season. He needs 128 yards to set a new NFL record for receiving yards in a season by a tight end. George Kittle just set that back in 2018 with 1,377 yards. He's going to get that in a couple of weeks, provided they're still playing, unless they sit him, for a game or two. Pretty amazing that this is how far the tight end position has come, because he's not alone. I mean, there's a handful of tight ends that do that kind of thing.
Yeah, there's a bunch of them. It is a wow, particularly if he pulls it off,
right,
and goes the distance and it
now
leads
you're talking
the league.
1,400 receiving yards.
Yeah.
I mean, I remember Tony Gonzalez was big, Shannon Sharp was big.
They were back, and Kellen Winslow never had a year anywhere close to this. It's a different world for tight ends now, and Travis he's knocking it out. And I think that the thing that gets you about this is the consistency that they can do it with week in, week out, year in, year out. And I think that's the most impressive part about those numbers. And good for him, man. That'll be a historic moment if he can pull it off.
Finally, we have one burning question where we have a query that involves a participant in Saturday's game between the Bills and the Broncos. We know that Josh Allen, Steve, is part of what is looking to be a pretty good 2018 quarterback class. Allen, Baker Mayfield, Lamar Jackson showing well for that group. Denver quarterback Drew Lock, one of 8 quarterbacks in the 2019 draft class. He was the 4th quarterback taken that year, 42nd overall pick. Kyler Murray was the top pick that year. The others taken ahead of Lock were Daniel Jones and Dwayne Haskins. The others taken after him, Will Grier in round 3, Ryan Finley and Jarrett Stidham in round 4, and there were some others after him. Trace McSorley, Gardner Minshew among them.
Right.
The burning question, Steve, is what quarterbacks from the 2019 quarterback class will have similar success to the top 3 success stories from the 2018 quarterback class. Now, there are a lot of factors to be considered here with respect to team, coaching, player development, quarterback dedication, etc. But here's how I paired them up, Steve. You tell me what you think. Baker Mayfield, I think the Baker Mayfield of the 2019 class is probably going to be Kyler Murray. And maybe I am a victim of comparing stature, quarterback grooming at the college level, because both went to Oklahoma. But I kind of see them similarly. And I think Arizona has similar skill people around Kyler, much the way the Browns do in Cleveland with Baker. You know, a lot of good receiving targets.
Yeah.
You know, a premier
Jarvis
guy.
Landry, OBJ.
Got somewhat of a running game, still figuring it out, but that just seemed like the comparison to me. I didn't really have a comparison for Lamar Jackson.
He's a unicorn.
But, well, right. There's nobody really like him. His skill set is in sharp contrast to others. I had Gardner Minshew for Sam Darnold because both players are on wayward franchises.
Yeah, that's true. That's true.
And will likely not get the player development.
Minshew was a 6th-round pick.
Right. But they will probably not get the player development they need.
Yes. They've both been nicked up. So.
And then for Dwayne Haskins, I had Josh Rosen because Dwayne Haskins is going to end up traded or somewhere else, much like Josh Rosen got bounced around too.
That's
but
right.
for Drew Lock, I compared him to Josh Allen. Now, I might be overly optimistic about Drew Lock, but the reason I went with this comparison, number 1, was because I didn't have a better one. But number 2, kid's got a decent arm. It's not a Josh Allen arm, but it's not far off. He loves throwing the deep ball, and he has receiving talent around him that has been assembled in a similar way to the way it's been assembled here in Buffalo. He's got Jerry Jeudy, who I think is, you know, a premier route runner. I'm not saying he's Stefon Diggs. He's got a deep threat in Cortland Sutton, who has been out all season with an injury. And he's got a really good young slot guy in KJ Hamler, and he's got an athlete at tight end in Noah Fant. In terms of the weapons around him, I think they're building it similar to the way it was built here in Buffalo in terms of getting those targets and talent around him so he can just distribute the football. How much he's dedicated to improving his own game, that stuff I do not know. I do not know him well enough.
We had we've been talking all week about Locke and how this last game was his best game as a pro, and there was a concerted effort in the game plan to throw short and easier completions.
Yeah, check downs. Go to the check down.
They have been pushing the ball down the field a ton, and those are hard throws to make. Now, you got a quarterback like Drew Lock who's got the big arm, and he's a big, tall guy, and he can see it. But, you're asking him to make the 5% completion throw every time.
Yeah.
And that's what your completion percentage is going to be. A little bit like Josh was at Wyoming. Then when they back off of that a little bit, they take the check downs, they have some throws that are easy completions. They get him started in the game 12 for 12 or 10 for 10 in that game against Carolina, and it's a whole different game. He has 4 touchdowns, 0 interceptions.
And a high completion percentage, 21 to 27.
In a season where he's been 58?
Yeah,
something
up and down.
Yeah, up and down. So I think that there's as much about the positives that's been around Josh here in Buffalo as the negatives have been around Drew Lock in Denver. You got a defensive head coach in Denver who is afraid as a defensive coordinator of this deep ball. So he says, well, throw the deep ball because that's what they're afraid of.
Yeah.
The guys over here in Buffalo are like, hey, let's be creative, give him some options, put some guys around him, give him some easy completions, and convince him he should take them. And now you got this Josh who's 10-3 headed to the playoffs, and Drew Lock who's over here trying to hit the 15-yard comeback to the opposite hash as an outlet. There's a difference in coaching philosophies there that only started to get fixed maybe this last week in Denver.
And Pat Shurmur will be a help for him. as the OC there in Denver. I think that's a good guy that knows how to work with quarterbacks and develop them. So hopefully that means good things for Drew Lock down the road. And I didn't even know this. He and Josh Allen are pretty good friends. They're buddies. They know each other pretty well. And I actually heard Josh on the conference call this week saying, yeah, Drew Lock's got the dance moves over me. Because he's been seen dancing on the sidelines when the defense is on the field, and he's got dance moves and whatnot. So Josh gave him the dance move title over him for sure. But they are good friends, so this will be an interesting battle this weekend. That is all the time we have for this episode of One Bills Live. Thanks for joining us. And remember, when there isn't enough time for One Bills Live, there's always enough time for One Bills Light. For Steve Tasker, I'm Chris Brown. Merry Christmas, everybody.